I'm making the statement that godliness, training in godliness, according to the Bible, training in godliness will do more to guarantee a successful life for you than any other training that you might take. Godliness is intimacy with Jesus that releases power into your life and results in outward signs of devotion. One more time. Godliness is intimacy with Jesus that releases power into your life and results in an outward devotion. Now, I've got those three important critical components to this definition because Paul talks about godliness in a variety of places. And like I said, he loves this word godliness, and it's in 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. It's all over the place. So I think it's important that we understand that what Paul means when he talks about godliness is it's an inward disposition in some way, that it's an inward alignment with God that actually releases his power into our life that can't be just contained within. It becomes actually an outward and visible sign of who we are to the world around us. Those three things seem to be critical for what Paul says. Listen to what he says in 2 Timothy verses 3, 1 through 5. He says, mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. Now, notice this. In 1 Timothy, when he's talking to Timothy, he says, the Spirit clearly says that in later times, some will abandon the faith. Then in 2 Timothy, he says again to Timothy, mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. If Paul was saying that we're in the last days back 2,000 years ago, we're still in the last days, and we're closer to that last day than ever before. But mark this, in the latter days, in the last days, there will be lovers, people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, holy, mackerel, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Listen to this. Having a form of godliness, but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. You can see, Paul says that it's possible to have an outward look of godliness, but not actually be godly. That it's possible to figure out what godliness looks like and to sort of create an image of it or an imitation of it, but you'll know the difference, Timothy, because there won't be any power in that life. So there's an inward disposition that has a power with it that sort of expresses itself in an outward devotion. Again, in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6, Paul says this, godliness with contentment is great gain. I love that verse. Godliness with contentment. In other words, if I can be content with godliness, it's great gain. But if I'm trying to use godliness to get some other gain, like financial gain or whatever it might be, then that's not going to give me contentment. But if I can train myself in godliness and I become content with godliness, life becomes unbelievably sweet. So this is our definition that at least I'm working off of with us this morning, that it's an inward intimacy with Jesus that brings, it unleashes, if you will, the power of God's kingdom into my life, and it will result always in outward manifestation, an outward expression of devotions. I can't maintain it. I can't contain it. When God is doing something in me, it begins to transform me. In other words, that pot begins to look differently on the outside. But you can reshape a pot, and it may not have been transformed inwardly. But we're talking about inward, powers released, outward devotion. Here's what I want to make. I'm going to do everything I can to gently persuade you that this statement I'm about to make is true. And that is that godliness will do more to provide for a successful life in this life and in the next than any other characteristic. Now, just think about that. I'm making the statement that godliness, training in godliness, according to the Bible, training in godliness will do more to guarantee a successful life for you than any other training that you might take. That's when I told my wife I was going to say that today, she said, woof. She said, you better define what you mean by success. So let's do that. Because I think probably all of us, listen, if we believed this, our lives would be different. So we don't believe this in some ways, but let's make sure that we're clear on what we mean by the issue or the definition of success. Now, I did some research because I thought, well, what do I mean by success, and what do we think of in terms of the culture, in terms of success? What I found in my research is this, that if you're a baby boomer and older, which I'm a baby boomer, so if you're a baby boomer and older, you and I have one definition of success. But if you're 30 and younger, you have another definition of success. And there's some similarities, but here's what at least my research turned up this. For those of us who are my age and older, we define success as financial stability, personal happiness, strong relationships, meaningful work or achievements, freedom, and independence. Let me just say those again. And if you're a baby boomer or older, see if this resonates with you. That you consider a successful life if you have financial stability, personal happiness, strong relationships, meaningful work or some kind of meaningful achievement, and you have freedom and independence in your life. That's success. Wow, that's awesome. Listen to how it changes for those who are 30 and under. For those of us who are 30 and under, here's what the definition has shifted to be. That success is a work-life balance. That we no longer are willing, for those of us who are under 30, are no longer willing to get up into that rat race in a way that we sacrifice being able to be with our families. So they want a work-life balance. They want purpose and meaning. They want mental health. They want experience over possession. Isn't that interesting? They're looking that a successful life is a life that's having wonderful experiences, not just a bunch of bigger and better possessions. It's not so much that I want to have the best car anymore. It's that I want to be able to have a life that's full of adventure and excitement. That's interesting to me. Last thing that they say is they certainly want financial stability, although what was noted in the research there was that financial stability for under 30 and under did not in any way mean extreme wealth. They weren't looking for extremes in wealth. You know, I want to be a billionaire. It was just that I want to make sure that I'm comfortable, and that's enough. I don't need any more than that. I think that's interesting. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's so interesting. But listen to those things: financial stability, personal happiness, strong relationships, meaningful work, freedom, independence, work-life balance, purpose, mental health, experience over possessions, financial stability. Everybody said that. Here's the thing. Godliness will guarantee success in these areas more than anything else. Godliness and training in godliness will do more for these things. One of the things that we know in all of the research has indicated this, and there's more and more research coming out about this all the time. One of the things we know is the higher your income level, the higher your education level, the more you begin to question the why. Why am I here? What's life really all about? When you go from survival, if you have to spend most of your time surviving, you may not be asking these big philosophical questions, but for us who are highly trained, highly educated, we spend some time thinking about what is the purpose of all of this? Well, listen, who can answer that question? Getting your training in your driver's license isn't going to answer that question. Most higher degrees will confuse you more than anything else about purpose and meaning. And so if we need purpose and meaning in our life, then we need to turn science. Listen, science, as much as it's so powerful and wonderful, can't give us purpose and meaning. Science can tell us how things work. Science can help us advance and fix some things, but it can't tell us what the purpose of life is. And so we're beginning to realize that if I'm going to have a successful life, there has to be a grounding in my life that I'm probably not going to be able to find anywhere else except in some kind of a faith tradition. Now, here's what I would say, is that all the research indicates that if you and I are faithful people, we go to worship on a regular basis, we're prayerful, we're in fellowship with other people who are people of faith, that our lives are better. I mean, in almost every category. So I'm hoping that I'm gently persuading you to believe that it's not just having a degree from Harvard that's going to guarantee success. It's not just having good equipping from, my body being in wonderful shape. It's that I need more than those things. They're not bad, but if I am not being trained in a godliness that can give my life anchoring and purpose and give my life relational strength, because I don't know, have you ever met a really smart person that had no relational skills at all? They're brilliant people. Sometimes you meet these folks, they're scientists or they're even physicians, some, highly educated and trained physicians. We're so grateful for them because they are experts at what they do. But you can't really have a good relationship with them. They don't have bedside manner sometimes. They're hard to talk to. They're hard to relate to. Wonderful people. I'm not trying to criticize them. But what I'm saying is that brilliance doesn't equal relational stability. And one of the things that both groups say is that they want purpose and they want good relationships. But biblical wisdom and training in godliness will do more for us in that than any other training that we can be. You see, here's the thing. Let's talk about money. Most of the research that I've looked at would say that if you are one of those big lottery winners, 9 out of 10 large winners of large lotteries become bankrupt within a few years. Think about all Hollywood and all of the folks that have bunches of money. Their marriages fall apart, right? Their kids are not healthy. They're strained relationships. Let me just talk about fame for a second. I was reading the other day an article that was quoting from Lady Gaga, and she was talking about how fame nearly swallowed her life whole. She said this. She said that, I could not at some point adequately distinguish between my persona on stage and who I was off the stage. That really resonated with me in the sense that I can understand how when you meet Lady Gaga, you're wanting to meet the persona that you see, the person who sings and writes songs, and so she's like, but so there's a loneliness with all of that fame. Because you don't get to be an ordinary person. You can never have moments where you're alone. And so we crave it until we've got it. I just read, unfortunately, that our friend Britney Spears is back in the news. Some of you don't even know probably who Britney Spears is, but for some of us, she was an exciting young singer back in the day. She spent, how many years of her life in a conservatorship because fame and wealth just crushed her. And so you and I need to understand that godliness is more important than all the money in the world, because if I don't have a godly foundation, then the money might just ruin me, take me in a place that I will be so unhappy. And we see that over and over and over again. Realizing that we can't, and I love in the for those of us who are older, the baby boomers, we want personal happiness. I think we're all coming to the understanding that happiness is a mist. That what we want really is joy and peace. Happiness is chasing after, just like somehow saying that if all the circumstances of my life could be just in the right order and they would stay there, then I could finally be happy. That's what we do all the time, right? We say, I could be happy if I got this job. I could be happy if she would say yes to marriage. I could be happy if my kids were... And so it's when you tie our happiness, which we do, into circumstances outside of our control, that's a miserable way to live. Money, by the way, money's a great servant, but Jesus talked more about money than anything else, anything else, but he talked a lot about money, and he basically said very clearly, money is a great servant, but it's a lousy master. In fact, doesn't the Bible say something like this? The love of money is the root of all evil. Godliness is a grounding. I love one of the songs that we sang this morning. It just so resonated with me. It says basically that God can take that burden of shame off me.